Hello? Hello? Everyone? Can you hear me? All right. It's the time. It's time. Let's meet with these power panelists. All right, everyone, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Come and have a seat here. Let's get the party started. Okay, cool. All right. And we need Sunny here. Is Sunny here? All right.
Push to speak.
Try it.
Test.
Yep. Good. All right. Everyone had a drink? Are we ready to start this party? Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. I think Sunny, as our host, should have started this part, right?
All right, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This is our celebration for AAPI Heritage Month, but it's not just for AAPI friends, it's for everyone coming from everywhere. So welcome everyone. I'm going to give it over to Feng to host the event. Now I'm done.
Thank you. You can see the Asian speed over there. So good afternoon, everyone, and hopefully you had your drink. Thanks for being here with us on the Tuesday afternoon. I'm Feng. I'm the CEO and president of Greater Austin Asian Chamber of Commerce here. We are a local nonprofit that focuses on two goals. One, make Austin global. By that, I mean connecting the Asian markets with Austin markets in two-way street. And we work with the City of Austin, the governor's office, and the Asian Austin Chamber on that front a lot. The second goal is to reduce the economic barriers for community of color to achieve the regional economic equity. So on that front, we work very closely with our minority sister chambers, which are, us, Asian, Hispanic Chamber, Black Chamber, LGBT Chamber. So that's a little bit about Asian Chamber. So today, we are in the May Asian American Heritage, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So it's my honor, and I'm very excited to share and to discuss some innovation insights with our esteemed guest here through the lens of a local Asian community. So hopefully you guys can walk away, feel informed. So for the next 45 minutes, our guest will share about their personal and company's journey and how being an Asian impacts their career paths and how international relations, especially U.S.-China relations, impact the innovational ecosystem on the local level in Austin and in Texas. And we'll leave 15 minutes in the end so that you all can chime in to ask questions, follow-up questions to know more from our esteemed guest. Without further ado, let me one by one introduce to you this power panel. Dr. Shen Han, founding partner of iFly VC, a venture capital firm that embraces investment opportunities in spaces that may not appear glamorous, but carry tremendous growth potentials. It focuses on technology-enabled transformation across the value chain of traditional industry to address underserved and underappreciated demand. In more than a decade of experience as a VC, Han led or contributed to many high-profile investments such as Oculus. I think everyone knows Oculus, acquired by Facebook for $2 billion now, and you'll hear it very soon if you haven't. AlertMe, acquired by British Gas, Comfy, acquired by Siemens. Those are just one of the few. And if you're the Asian in Austin, you might have heard of this app called We. WEEE exclamation mark. So that app is the largest and the fastest growing ethnic e-grocer in North America. The company very recently closed the Series E round at the evaluation of $4.1 billion. iFly remained the second largest shareholder of that company. All right. As if that's not amazing enough, some fun facts about Dr. Han. He holds 4 patents, and he has private pilot license, and he won a dignitary champion of international cherry pit spitting competition. Welcome, Dr. Han.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, next, our second guest, we have Ming Cho, co-founder and CEO of Seoul Chinese Delivery. Born here, so see, he has a fan base already. And born here in Austin, Texas, Seoul Chinese Delivery takes pride in offering delicious Chinese food delivered to your doorstep without any delivery fees and a strict no tipping policy. So Seoul Chinese Delivery really is a technology company because they built its own proprietary platform to manage the front-end local e-commerce website, a robust middle and back-end logistic platform, and last-mile delivery integrations. And we have that guy who built this whole thing sitting right here, Angel, as the partner. So Seoul does not use third-party delivery relationships. Instead, they have their own fleet of branded cars and W-2 drivers. That's how much they care about their staff. Ming has been in Austin for 37 years, eventually graduating from the Macomb School of Business at UT and pursued a career in entrepreneurship. He and his wife, lovely Jenna over here, they opened their first Chinese takeout restaurant in 2008, fell in love with the restaurant business, and never looked back. So today, them and their partners, Angel and Eunice, sitting over there, have 3 live locations, and they're opening the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th under the way, all in Austin area before expanding to Dallas and eventually to the rest of the U.S. Welcome, Ming. All right. Last but not least, our host, Dr. Sunny Zhang, is a founding partner at Born Global Ventures, investing in early-stage tech startups led by immigrant founders.
Ooh, immigrants, good immigrants.
A tenured marketing professor at the Cameron School of Business, University of St. Thomas, and a member of the board of advisors at the George H.W. Bush Foundation of U.S.-China Relations. She has focused on tech innovation, digital marketing, and international business for over 20 years as a researcher, educator, entrepreneur, and investor. Dr. Zhang was recently recognized for 2 big awards. One, 2022 SBA Small Business Champion of the Year. And 2, Outstanding Professor at the Cameron School of Business of the University of St. Thomas. Congratulations and welcome, Sunny. Usually the intro doesn't take this long, but these guys are so achieved. We have to let you know a little bit about themselves. But now, they're going to tell you guys more about themselves. So before we start, let's give some stats of the landscape of the Asian community here in Austin. Let's take a quick pulse survey. 1 to 5, 5 being I know who are the Asians here in town, and then in and out about them. 1 is like, I don't know, I probably at best know some Chinese restaurant, and then Seoul Delivery. So who are at level 1? All right? You guys look Asian. Who are at level 2? Let's say Austin. Let's say Austin. Level 1. Level 2. Okay. All right. Level 3. All right, level 4. Nice. You've only been here a year. Level 5. You are expert. All right. So yeah, I can say that because that's what we do in Asian Chamber. Follow us on website and social media if you want to know more about the Asian community here. So Asians in Central Texas are the fastest growing population for the past 3 decades. So it shouldn't be surprising that last year, after the 2020 census, it turns out that the Asian population almost doubled. We increased 70% in the past decades. 1 in 5 people who migrated to Texas, to Austin in the past decades or of Asian descent. And we're the most diverse race in Austin region alone. We have about 20 ethnicities within the Asian race, Indian, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Filipinos are the top 5 population, but we also have a Nepalese, right? So so we're not monolithic for sure. These are just some quick overview of who are the Asians here. So now I wanted to open up to finally the guest speakers to share your stories, your firsthand accounts of your amazing career path that features innovation, and describe how you think being AAPI impact your career path. It could be negative or positive. Go for it. Let's start with Dr. Han.
Right, now it's green. So thanks again for... Yeah, sure. Probably mic is better. Hello? Yes. Yes, thanks again for having me. I was born global, specifically in the country of China. Spent my first 20 years going from kindergarten to my college, or in the same town, specifically the same zip code, right? Just that's where I am from. In 1998, I came to the States. I spent part of my academic years in Chicago, then working in Philadelphia, the Bay Area for 12 years of venture investment career till about a year ago, actually 13 months ago, specifically on April 10th, moved to Austin, Texas. And throughout the whole journey, to me personally, it's a fun as a Chinese or Asian exploring different cultures, food across different parts of the country. And right now, I have about just 6 states left across the United States I haven't visited. To me, it's kind of appreciation of how great this country is and how diverse it is. Overall, I did not have too much specific negative experience as Asian, but I did come across stories where my friends got different kind of issues, or even about a year-ish ago, when there was such a surge of violence against the Asian community. And now, as you can tell, I speak pretty calmly, but about a year ago, I was on a Zoom conference about anti-violence against Asian. If you look up this videotape on YouTube, you can see me go very emotional. I was very angry, seriously, because it just touched my heart. Imagine any of those violence happen to any of your friends or family. It's just unacceptable. So first of all, I felt, as Asian, the motto here is not just that we bring value to the society, to this country, to grow business, to be this kind of a role, but we have all the right to show our emotional side, to support each other, right? And when bad things happen, we must speak up. We must stand up to unite with each other. So that's a big motivation for me to be further involved. So when Sunny emailed me about this event, I don't even know what the agenda. I didn't even ask what are the questions. I said, of course, I'm in, right? I think that's the spirit to share with one another. If I can do anything possible to support the community, I just love to do it. Then going back to the question about the journey itself, I was a student, I was in industry, and because you mentioned the story of the international cherry pit spitting competition. So if I can steal a couple minutes to talk about it, because I think it does matter a lot. So that was back in summer 2002, my final year as a graduate student at U Chicago, finishing my PhD. my friends dragged me over to a farm in Michigan to do cherry picking. I didn't know there was a competition.
It's literally cherry. I thought
It was cherry.
Metaphorically.
It is real cherry, right? And I got to this farm, and I saw the big banner. If you sign up for this cherry spitting competition, you can get free lunch. Oh, that's a big deal, right? You know, to a grad student, a free lunch is a big deal. It's always a big deal to me. But then, you know, just to sign up, I realized all you got to do is simple, right? Get it, just one cherry, eat the pulp, save the pit, and then stand behind the line, spit as far as you can. This competition started in the 70s. You can look it up. It's a real competition. People came from Germany, Canada, you know, US. At the time, I was still a Chinese citizen, so I represented China. And I think I vaguely remember what high school physics teacher taught me, right? You try to hit for this 45 degrees angle, and I had only one shot, and I managed to spit as hard as I could. And guess what? You know, for this quote-unquote amateur group, right? They had an actual professional group, so they separated the two groups, and I won. Right? The day became very different. Initially, I was so upset. Why do you want me to go to a farm 200 miles away? I can just go to a grocery store for cherries. Then suddenly, I became I guess, celebrity of the day, right? I was interviewed by the local newspaper. The school boys asked me for autograph. I got a box of free produce. I got $25 of gift certificate. So the news reporter asked me, oh, so what's the whole story? You know, how long did you prepare? I said, of course, nothing. But you know, there was a lady standing next to us. She heard what I was talking about is the same as I told you. So she said, oh yeah, you never know until you try. Look, yeah, that's the spirit, right? That's the spirit I wanted to share on my resume. That's a perfect icebreaker. That's a spirit I wanted to bring to the startup community. That's a spirit I want to share with the Asian community or any kind of community. You know, it's very easy to be complacent where you are or where I am, but we just got to keep on trying. And the other side is I was talking to a co-founder of LinkedIn just a few weeks ago. And one thing I realized, you know, even at his level of success, he still admitted he was trying very hard, but you know, a lot of things he tried still failed. But it just got to keep on trying. Right. So finally, a little bit talking about the venture investment. You know, there are all kinds of opportunities out there which we are excited about. But I also have a strong passion about how we can invest in Asian or ethnic minority-founded companies because people come in with a very unique insight into the market, into the needs. And then when all these very smart, hard-driven people like me come up with a technology layer of enablement to make it better, cheaper, easier, that's where the innovation and opportunities stand. So as an investor, that's something, you know, I think we should definitely pay attention to, right? And when the next generation entrepreneur becomes successful, they will turn around and come back to support more of the community. And that's the kind of a cycle I personally feel about you know, doing more work with. So again, you know, I don't want to steal more time. Thanks again for having me. I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Wow. You can keep that one. Now you just need to show us. That's pretty power.
Exactly.
I'll tell you the distance when the event is over.
Okay.
Okay, that was literally the question I was going to ask. Is like, we're impressed by your accolades and Dr. Chen and all that, but really, I just want to know how far did that seed go? Right.
At the back.
Hi guys, my name is Min Cho. I am the co-founder and CEO at So Chinese Delivery, which is here in Austin, Texas. My whole life, my family and my parents have been entrepreneurs, and I grew up as an entrepreneur. When I was a child, we were literally selling sunglasses at the intersection of Guadalupe and 38th Street. And today we sell Chinese food, and I'm reminded by a story I had that I shared with my partners and some of our friends. When I was 7 years old, it was my first experience with Chinese food, and it was chicken fried rice. And I remember telling my Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be a Chinese food cook helper when I was 7 years old. And my wife is our chef, and I am her helper. And so this has come full circle, and I am living my dream. But what I'm mostly reminded by is that innovation isn't limited to just technology. It's not just software or hardware. There's innovation in changing work culture. It's something that we focus a lot on at So Chinese Delivery. Eunice, who is our Chief People Officer, concentrates a lot of her efforts on making sure that our staff is happy, that we take care of our staff, and we provide them with the resources that they need to develop and grow with the company and not for the company. And innovation also goes into the food. It's not just soy sauce and sugar and MSG. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go into, but there is a science behind it, and you can innovate food in a way that, historically it's just not the same. And so kudos to Jenna, our Chief Culinary Director, who innovates food. But we are, in fact, a technology company, and so, to answer your question, Feng Feng, we look at innovation in many different ways with many different perspectives and angles, and make sure that we don't just innovate in one segment, but we innovate in every segment we can as we continue to grow the company, including things like giving back and being a part of the community that you're in. I mean, when's the last time you heard of a Chinese restaurant concept trying to engage with the community? And I'm fortunate that I have partners who have that built into their DNA, that giving back to the community and being a part of the community is as important as serving the community. And so, through our So Giving initiative, this is all innovation that we have as part of our business. And so that's why we're here today. And I think that is really the formula to our growth and success, and that's something that we won't ever forget as we continue to grow our business. So thank you for being here.
I can totally vouch for that, because So Chinese Delivery was one of the first businesses to give back to the local community at the start of the pandemic by offering free and hot meals to anyone in need. So to date, So Giving, that's their campaign, has provided 22,000 meals to those in the Austin area.
It's a lot more than that now.
Absolutely.
Gotta be.
That's really inspiring. From Fang Fang to Han to Min, I just feel like so energized being here. I also feel like I owe you guys a proper opening. Wanted to thank, first of all, our partners in Austin, because we've been collaborating over the pandemic, online with a lot of events. And that's the reason, although it's my first time after the pandemic visiting in Capital Factory, I was greeted by so many wonderful friends in the Born Global community. So I wanted to, first of all, thank our local partners, including, of course, the Greater Austin Asian Chamber of Commerce, led by Fang Fang, and also our, great partner, which I'm also part of, the George H.W. Bush Foundation of U.S.-China Relations, David Farstein, the President and CEO sitting there, and Leslie, who's been working behind the scenes, and of course, Shane, hidden at the back. And of course, YJ's not here personally, but he brought tons of swag from Dell Technologies, Dell for Startups, so make sure you grab, it's also from one of our partners from Dell. And also a special shout out for friends coming all the way from Houston, carpooling with me. Speaking of food technology, we have Gita bringing yummy Pantene's plant-based innovative food all the way from Spoon and Sprout from Houston. Make sure you test it out. And also Mahesh here. I just wanted to do a shout out from our Houston friends. Of course, again, thank you for all the hospitality in Austin. We actually collaborated a lot before the pandemic. Because a little introduction. thanks to Fang Fang also, introducing me as the general partner at Born Global Ventures. But we also, in addition to the VC fund, have a venture studio, Born Global Studio, as well as a nonprofit organization. Speaking of giving back, really bring everyone together in the Born Global community. And I'm really excited to see a lot of our community members that's been supporting over the pandemic virtually and meeting you all in person. So a little bit of my story, which will make sense. Why am I doing what I do? And I think there's also a lot of, Asian kind of expectation. I wanted to start by everyone has two lives. At least. One is the life you were born with, your parents, your family, your social network is expecting you as default. The other one is the life you choose to do. So I think I started by my academic career, right? As Fang Fang introduced me, I'm still a university professor. I've been teaching in 4 great schools in the United States for the past 18 years, marketing, management, entrepreneurship. So that's like the default life where you go to high school, you go to college, grad school, get PhD. If there's another degree, I'm sure I'm going to continue, right? It's like you run out of degrees, you become a professor, and then you teach, you get tenure, what next? So essentially, ever since I started teaching, other than the first semester when I was fresh off the boat, barely speaking fluent English, I did the lecture kind of style. I always took my students to work with local startups, nonprofit organizations who are limited in their budget, but doing amazing things, make the world a better place. So the students get hands-on experience, while the companies also can get the support with, the future generation of talents. So essentially this, skilled, and after tenure, I started our studio. At the time, we call it Z-Lab, and LAB stands for Linking Academia with Business, because there's a huge gap, right? And then Z stands for the last letter of the alphabet, where you're either newcomers fresh off the boat, or you're the new kid on the block. You're underrepresented, you're underestimated, you're underserved, you're overlooked. So that's the kind of community we wanted to serve as a studio. Of course, that includes women, minority, immigrants, and so on. And then we started building our own portfolio company. In fact, I turned my dissertation research about social networks into a startup, and then that eventually brought more startups in our own studio. We started investing and building from a venture studio model. We're co-founding, we're co-building our own portfolio companies, like our own baby startups. And then we did so much community work over the pandemic, because guess what? When the world is turning dark, if you can shine a little bit of light, you could make so much great impact. And I also think it's really when the world is in crisis, you show your real character. All the giving, like Ming has demonstrated in Austin, and Han himself has been really being a great ambassador, promoting Texas over in the Bay Area. He's like the biggest advocate. All my Bay Area friends are telling me Han is telling everyone there to either invest here or just move your startups here. So essentially, it's at time of crisis like this, you really make a difference. And that's what we started in Houston, initially as part of Houston Tech Rodeo. It was just an idea like, hey, we need to celebrate the international community in Houston. By the way, in Houston, we have 1 in 4 Houstonians as foreign-born. We need to get the data in Austin, too. But essentially, we have 90-plus consulates. We have tons of trade agencies and commercial and chambers of commerce of different ethnicity groups, different culture of origin. At the time, everybody's like, maybe next year. I was like, let's give it a try. Before we know it, we started a 12-hour program. We call it Around the World, Around the Clock, literally from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., going over from APEC to MENA, to Africa, to Europe, to Latin America, to North America, with startup showcase, with investor speed networking, ecosystem, roundtable. We really brought everyone together who didn't find a place where they belong, because you all came from somewhere and you're sort of stuck in your own culture or ethnic group or maybe your domain expertise, we are interconnecting otherwise disconnected networks and bring all the stars together. Like, you're all the stars, but we want to make sure we're in the galaxy network supporting each other, because we're celebrating the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, not only for a matter of representation that we'll cover, but also for business opportunities. Asians are the biggest population. It's over 60% of Asians in the world. Essentially, if you collaborate, in the spirit of scalability, right? Han knows the bottom line of venture investing is scalability. The word born global is not only where you come from, it's also business strategy. I have to tell you that as a business professor, it's actually a literature word from business research. It's the strategy where companies have a global strategy from day one. Unlike the mom and pop store that scale to cover the city, cover the state, cover nationally, internationally, you actually have a global strategy day one. And I believe that can be done for all technology companies wherever you're born. But working with immigrants is almost like your shortcut to taking your startups global, because guess what? Speaking of representation, 55% of immigrants, 55% of U.S. unicorns were founded by immigrants. So essentially, that's really what motivated us to start the Born Global movement in Houston, and essentially led to our rebrand from Z-Lab to Born Global, because we don't even need to explain to people what Z stands for. Everybody gets it. We're all born global, right? So essentially, through the three pillars of venture capital fund, the startup studio, and the nonprofit organization, interconnecting and partnering with all these amazing organizations, both locally and internationally, we're providing what I call 4 capitals. Because for this group of people, it's not just about writing a check. And good luck, go figure. We need the financial capital. I wish I have the 4 fingers. We need the financial capital, but we also need, thank you, Min. We need the intellectual capital, which is really the know-how, the strategy, navigating, the complexity. The human capital, which is access to talents, right? Especially when you're new, like you're not as well connected. And then, very important, everyone, social capital. It is how you're connected, like all the resources and connections, interconnection. And of course, financial capital. So that's really what we're here for. And of course, we're excited to be here celebrating AAPI Heritage Month with Fang Fang and our Austin friends. But I really, really wanted to almost like call for everyone, regardless of where you come from. We're all born global. We're in this together. The more collaborative we are, the bigger we can take our business scale up, not only covering the United States, but also internationally, globally, all over the world. So that's all. Thank you. Too much time.
I want to go kick some ass right now. I'm all pumped up.
That's energy. Thank you all. And Sunny is right. So not only we have the guest from Houston, I know we have a guest from Boston, VC friends from Boston and China. And then we have friends from Singapore. Where's Anthony? Igloo Company, right there. So that's literally in this small events, we have this much diversity. So that also, echoes my observation living in Austin. There are influx of international engagement. Some of them are organically happening. People are choosing Austin, choosing Texas. So, and we have some examples here, very strategic. We hear from the pitting competition, very strategically and very academically, they chose Austin, and the Maine just born here and then stayed here and then probably gonna die here. So from your perspective, wait, that's a dedication. So from your different perspective, can you share with international companies, especially the Asian companies who slowly to hear about Austin, but not knowing too much. Why Austin? Why Texas?
This was not on the list of questions that we were preparing for. But having been here for 37 years, I probably have a little bit of context that I could provide. My family came in as an immigrant family. We were sponsored by our aunt and uncle who were in the medical field. Aside from a short stint in California, we returned to Austin when the population was 300,000. And today, I think Austin proper is close to 1.5 million or something. Austin Metro being close to 2.5 million. But as an entrepreneur, what you see is this progression in a city that is truly growing in magnitudes that is hard for me to really understand because I've only lived here in Austin. So you hear what you hear about San Francisco and the Bay Area, what's going on the coasts. To me, this is another walk in the park, and this is what I've been accustomed to. And it's hard for me to truly embrace that because, again, it's been a part of my life, it's my tradition. And what I embrace the most, though, is the growth. There are a lot of folks who in Austin call them boomers or whatever you might want to call it, don't California my Austin and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, as innovators, as entrepreneurs, we want growth, we want progress, and we want change. I take a look at the downtown skyline and see today, what you see today from 10 years ago was a world of difference. What you see 10 years ago from 30 years ago is a world of difference. We live in Northwest Austin today, and it's the same neighborhood that my aunt and uncle lived in, and that was the boonies of Austin back then. And today it's uptown, right? And so, again, I think the message here is that embracing growth and change is absolutely the way to really develop, and really, I think embracing these kinds of venues and the networking. I went to high school at a primarily minority and urban with 5 Asian people, and I didn't have the same concerns with being bullying. I mean, I'm a 6'3", 200-pound guy at high school. Not a lot of people were bullying me, but still, it was all very foreign to me when I went to UT and I saw a lot of Asian folks and started meeting Asian women, married an Asian girl, and but again, being able to adapt and change and accepting innovation, being able to network with organizations like the Asian Chamber has been a very, very important part of my life. I serve on the board, and for me, it's an honor and a privilege, and not the other way around. And so, yeah. And so again, I thank everyone here for being here, because this is really what we need to do, is to continue to network with our neighbors and our friends and our city and our community, so that I don't really even know how the analogy goes, but we all can grow together. The Asian tradition, often in the past, especially in the Korean tradition, is there was a lot of competition, survival of the fittest. But what I learned as I continue to embrace the Asian community was that we can actually all rise together. And so that's been a big inspirational message that I've received over the last 10 years. So,
Thank you. So my journey to Texas started from February 2004. I was visiting my friend in Houston. And I was flying from Philadelphia, and we decided to make a trip to Austin on a weekend. Honestly, the only thing I can remember from the trip was the state capitol building down the street. And it was very uneventful. But obviously, as life went on, I realized, gosh, Austin has changed a lot every single time I came back to visit again. And during my venture career, when I used to work for other funds, I made a couple of investments in Texas that turned out to be pretty good as well. And then COVID happened. By the way, before COVID happened, to your point, back in California for a while, because I made a lot of effort to get to Silicon Valley, to get into the venture career. It was very hard to get in. You might know this already. So I used to think Silicon Valley was the center of the universe. I was pretty sure I would die there. But then COVID happened, of course. And I was busier and I was getting still a lot of quote-unquote deal flow from anywhere of the country, right? Because people already started moving around. And I never want to say, oh, California is just dead or New York is going down. They are still big. They still have a lot of strength, right? So let's face that. But let's also respect the fact that there is an ongoing rebalancing process in terms of migration of population, companies moving their headquarters, talents shifting their focus to different kind of priorities. That's going on for a while, and let's face it. So as an investor, I think the nature of my job is to seek and seize the non-obviousness, hopefully ahead of most others. So we'd have to do something about it. So COVID happened, I was busier, I was really like, gosh, if I were still single, I could have moved to Hawaii, that would be the best. But then I started calling my friends. I called only three friends in Austin. And after 2 weeks, I made up my mind that we should move to Austin. Right? Then, of course, it took another 2 months to convince my wife that I was not joking. Then it took another 2 months to find a house here, to buy it. And then another 2 months later was April last year to make the relocation happen. So I can tell all my entrepreneurial friends, when I, as an investor, tell you, bias for action, now I have a live example as an investor as well. But a very funny thing, as soon as I announced I fly, myself, the family, we would move to Austin, I got a few private messages. One of them, it was a very good friend of mine in California, made a comment. The quality of houses in Texas is worse than in California. I said, how did you reach that conclusion? His knowledge was that there's no requirement for a permit. You can build any house, therefore the quality is worse. I was, you're probably right about licensing requirement, but I'm sure the market will filter out the bad apples if people don't build a solid house. I'll skip a lot of the details back and forth. This guy and I had all kinds of interesting conversations. But after 5 minutes, I asked a question, have you been to Texas? You know the answer. It was no. So I said, of course, come to our new place, stay with us, get a feel, right? But that was also interesting to think about human nature, perception, misperception, going back to the nature of my job. If everybody loves Tesla, that's the stock price you pay for. But if many of us recognize some upgoing trend and be able to capture that, then that's where we potentially, as an investor, can find that alpha component of the investment return. And by the way, I just saw another gentleman, David, he moved from Palo Alto to Texas a few months before we did. He's also an investor, and we compare notes. It's all brilliant, right? So that's why the fun part of my job is when people don't agree with each other. And we don't have to be right all the time. We have to be just right a couple of times. And then going back to this Asian and AAPI initiative, I think it's our advantage because we come in with a different perspective about this world. The kind of level of insights and the level of perspective itself has a lot of value in it, right? How you run an operation of a next generation Asian restaurant itself has a lot of question mark to address. But when you are able to tackle that, that's where you can build value. When you look at the international perspective, as much as we think, U.S. is still the strongest economy, has a lot of competitive advantage, and then the global is also going through lots of evolution. As much as a lot of our portfolio companies hire engineers overseas, from what I saw in terms of interaction between the team in the U.S. versus the engineers overseas, it's just not that they are leveraging on the lower labor cost. In many cases, they found the local engineers, given what they saw in their home market, whether it's China, Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, they actually brought in a ton of insights because they had to battle, or they used to battle some of the more competitive consumer or consumer internet space in those countries. So when they survived and thrived, they taught us a ton about how they can build a better best practice or help the US team here avoid some of the pitfalls that became obvious to us, but took some of these other teams, maybe millions of dollars or even tens of millions of dollars to learn, right? So all these sort of things keep on making me think that as Asian in this country, not only we are proud of our heritage, our cultural background, food, but also we should really leverage on the advantage of being Asian, bringing all the unique assets, innovation, insights, and everything, right? So let's all cheer for success.
Thank you, thank you. One company discover Austin, Texas, and passed that level of, okay, Austin, let's move here. So I want to share that story from Anthony. Anthony is a founder of Igloo Company. Igloo Company's vision is a world without lock. So they're making the digital locks. Am I correct? The one without keys. So locks. Yeah. So when they were guided to Austin, to Texas, and then they came here to Austin and then say, well, let me figure out why Austin, why Texas. And when they passed there, and then they discovered, I was introduced to him, and then he discovered, I did not even know there's an Asian community here. He had numerous questions from the restaurant to school, to all the supports that when he decided to move to Austin, then he would need immigration, right? Banking, real estate, staffing, all sorts of service to help these companies to migrate. And then I remember after the whole day hanging out, and he felt comfortable, and he was asking me if the Texans find out our company's headquarters in Asia, would they have an issue with our product? That was in the middle of this anti-Asian hate sentiment, right? When you are outside of US reading all these headlines everywhere, that you don't know what's really happening. And then for a business who had this chance to have this local discovery, it would be, like if they didn't, then a lot of business decisions are gonna be aborted before that, right? So unfortunately. So that story, and then we're still helping them with the staffing and all sorts of connections. So I wanted to ask our, new Austinite and then old Austinites, when people move to Austin, especially Asian, since we are the Asian, events here, for the Asian immigrants, companies move here, how can they find some resources? And what do you have some suggestions for the Asians to look to jumpstart their either startup or companies or whatever that venture?
Well, for me, again, having been a longtime Austinite, I think my perspective might be a little bit different from Hans here, but even having been in Austin for this long, it wasn't until post-college when I really discovered the Asian networks. Being joining the Greater Austin Asian Chamber, being involved with various other organizations has been so key. I mean, I think my partners would agree that even SO's success today, we owe a lot of this to the network of folks that we've met. And what I think why it's so inspiring is that when you do meet the right people with like-mindedness and the same kind of spirit, there is a groupthink, evolves, and people really are very helpful. It's one of the questions that I continue to get as a restaurant person. I get a ton of questions all the time about how to help them start a restaurant. And my number one advice that I always give them is ask for help, ask to talk to people because, and I'm sure it's the same in many other communities, but here in Austin, even in the restaurant industry, and I know it's true in the tech industry, but in the restaurant industry, we're family. Like we collaborate, we talk to each other, we hang out, we send texts, we cuss each other out, we do all kinds of stupid things together. But that's the point, is that you do it together, and look, I think there's no surprise that Asians tend to be extremely prideful and very egotistical oftentimes, and asking for help is often very difficult to do. But when you can overcome that challenge of asking for help, it is amazing how many people are willing to work together, and especially if you do have people that may have come on that same boat, or maybe you are in the same town. Like I've got buddies over here that are here just to give me a hard time about being here on the panel, but we're also working together to, try to have a carbon neutral, business. Like I got my friend there, Tree, who has, who's doing amazing things about trying to, lower the impacts of business on Mother Earth. And yeah, we can go have dinner and have a hard time and give each other a hard time, but at the same time, we're improving our businesses together. And so, the folks at Igloo Company, I remember when we were talking about this at the chamber quite a bit, you reaching out and then the chamber also working with you. I think this is a prime example of how, working together. We're here in America and you're thousands of miles away in Singapore, and then you choose Austin as a place to grow and innovate. That is truly like a prime example, or a very good example of just reaching out and just saying, how can I help you? How can you help me? And let's build this together.
Okay, so this might be the last question. Let's touch upon a little bit international relation and then, big environment, but not geopolitical issues specifically, more of the impact that comes from the international relations, especially the US-China relation nowadays are pretty stringent, and then there's often looming trade war threats thrown around. See, in this environment, would you advise do you still think it's a good idea to advise the entrepreneurs to invest Chinese or U.S. Overseas market? What kind of advice would you give for these Asian startups or U.S. startups that wanted to go international?
Yeah, so I'll take this question. So it's a hard one, right? No one has a crystal ball to tell what's coming next 10, 20, 30 years. But the world is certainly changing. But largely speaking, before we touch on U.S.-China specifically, we have already advised all our portfolio companies to brace for impact. Besides the geopolitical issues, the capital market has seen lots of downward pressure, right? The stock price will eventually go back to challenge all the late stage, early stage venture investing and fundraising. Inflation, supply chain instability, no one can really escape from the gravity field of all the changes. So that's why every startup in our portfolio has been or is going to start raising pretty soon. And our general advice is to focus less on valuation. Make sure you have extended cash runway. And many of them do have some revenue streams, so they have to rebuild their financial model or projection in terms of where they have to spend less or where they should just cut out all these unnecessary investments. And I was just in Paris about a week ago. I was talking to a few other investors in Europe as well. And that kind of sentiment is similar. They were facing other uncertainties in terms of the energy shortage, the war in Ukraine, and so on. So basically, the world is changing. The next 30 years will no longer be the same as the past 30 years. For good or bad, is that going to be catastrophic, or is that going to be just smooth rebalancing? Again, time will tell. But coming to U.S.-China, I'm not in government affairs. It's hard to predict how the governments will handle the tension. But there are a few ongoing matters that we are watching closely. The first one is obviously supply chain. For any of those companies here in the States that rely on China for import, export, that's certainly something, people, I don't have to tell them this. They have already started finding alternatives resource to get the supply chain either from Vietnam, Nicaragua, India, and so on. So to China, that's a big challenge because if they see the exodus of the supply chain, that means a lot of jobs, lots of local economy being disrupted. The second part is when we look over China, we don't make active investment in China, but like I mentioned, we watch closely how the consumer internet in Asia usually works out. It's a lot more competitive. So whoever survived and thrived must have done a lot of things right. So let's just learn from them, right? So that has happened in the last few years. We talked to a lot of our friends there, either investor or operators, what went well, what didn't. As you mentioned, we have this company called We in the grocery space. Before COVID, I sent the CEO to China twice to learn from all the top 6 players in terms of online grocery best practice. And it turned out we learned something so impactful that they decided not to learn from some of the practice that seemed to be very nice but could cost a lot of money. But the third piece is the consumer internet company in China has faced a lot of political pressure, right? The stock price in education, internet, and what is the third one? Gaming. It has gone down so much. All these big companies are laying off a lot of engineers. They are all trained by top schools. And so I think, very unfortunate for everybody who got impacted. But I do know many of those engineers are being recruited by overseas companies here in the States or Europe. I know people are strong, will just never stop trying. But that also presents new opportunities for American startups here who are able to manage overseas talents. And finally, I think just in terms of the travel freeze, the COVID restriction, the quarantine is adding a lot of uncertainty. So when you really ask me what to do about international trade or expansion, my honest answer is just hold on, watch, right? And there is a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes making a decision not to act right away is probably the best action to do.
Thank you. We'll spare the Koreans to answer this U.S.-China relation question.
I'm Korean. I just sell Chinese food. But I do want to add just one little thing. Although I don't have quite the context for U.S.-China relations, on a more local perspective, one of the questions that you asked earlier about was general advice, especially in this climate when there's still Asian hate, Asian sentiment, anti-Asian sentiment is still alive and rampant. The biggest thing that I think we took on as a company is to purposefully and intentionally be real resilient. Like, being resilient is often a reaction, but we want to proactively be resilient and also proactively be on the offensive. So when COVID hit Austin, back in early 2019, it was still the China virus, it was still the Wuhan virus. And here we are selling Chinese food in Austin, Texas, right? And we were scared. We were scared that this would impact our business and people wouldn't order Chinese food just because of the narrative that was being preached at the time. And so I saw a lot of our restaurant friends talk about, hey, we're taking all these precautionary measures, we're doing PPE, we're doing all these things, which are all defensive measures to try to, send message out. And we decided not to do that. We said, well, first of all, as a restaurant, we should be doing that anyway. We shouldn't be preaching what we should be doing as a default. But instead, we reached out to the community and we said, look, here we are, we're a Chinese restaurant here in Austin, Texas, in America, during the pandemic, and we want to feed you, right? And we want to take care of our community. And that has changed the way our company looked at the community. We believe it's hard for us to qualify or quantify the effect it had on our business, but today I think we have a pretty good reputation as being community leaders. We're just Chinese food salespeople, right? But we're community leaders, and so the message here is that when you are faced with adversity like that, don't go on the defensive, go on the offensive, and purposefully be real resilient.
Thank you, Ming. Sunny, do you wanted to chime in
Min,
before we
I
open up
loved
the
your
floor?
approach because I'm going to wear my social psychologist hat for a moment to echo both what Han said and what Min said. In fact, there's research that shows, don't think about polar bear. Guess what? That's what you think about for the rest of the day. So being defensive is really not the best approach in terms of all the, messaging. So, I felt like this is a fantastic case study of being proactive and not just like playing victims and, Anyways, I don't want to comment further, but going back to what Han mentioned earlier, because I want to touch up a little bit before the US-China, because he mentioned a lot of fundamental biases in decision-making, which is very prevalent in the VC space in terms of who are getting the funds. And, a lot of minority friends here are probably aware of the fact that, it's just like very hard to get funding. Guess what? It's because of decision-making biases, largely driven not only by cognitive psychology, but social psychology in the sense that, look at who's on the other side of the table. They're more likely to invest people who look like them. So, speaking of, so Han, like basically in the Bay Area, became an insider. There's also two worlds of venture capital, everyone. There's the insiders and the outsiders. So I'm really glad Han took the step, came to Austin and show the rest of the world, show his friends in the Bay Area, guess what? We could do it from here because Silicon Valley is not a geographical concept. It is an ideology that can go viral to the rest part of the world, the rest part of the United States. And that's what I'm very passionate about, Heartland America. Because I went to school from, and I taught from University of Alabama to Indiana to Colorado State to now University of St. Thomas in Houston. Guess what? There's actually an emergence of global market. White paper done by American Heartland Association showing that immigrants are actually coming to Heartland. So, Han, you made the right decision. But going back to the biases which, Asian Americans and all kinds of minority groups are suffering from, it's because what we read in media, like China-related resources included. Let me give you an example that has nothing to do with ethnicity and just so we get a sense. What do you think is the age group that makes the most successful high-growth startups? What do you think? Give me a guess. Give me an age group.
45.
You guys know the deal, but if you read media, you feel like it's college dropouts, it's the young cool kids, 20, maybe 30, you see all kinds of outliers. They get media coverage, but research done by professors at MIT, Harvard, Stanford, they study unicorns, they study high growth companies. The highest age group is actually 42 to 45. Essentially, it's much older guys, but then you don't read their stories. And, unicorn founder, I'm not going to dig into data, but similarly, the kind of understanding we're getting of not only China, but other countries, there's an information asymmetry. We don't know as much about them, comparing with how over the years they've been observing the United States, learning from the United States. So I'm really inspired by the fact that Han sent one of his fastest growing portfolio companies CEO to learn because, speaking of e-commerce, I did my research on risk perception in e-commerce in 2000, 20 years ago, before Amazon. Basically, there's a lot of competition. There's actually a lot of, advances. So, now focusing on this question, I felt like, first of all, we know about the trade war, but do we know the global talent war? Basically, the trade war is not good for the United States, not good for China. In fact, both are losing in the talent front. Because, over the years, all the talents that's powering innovation, powering technology advancement, entrepreneurship, guess what? Some of them came as business people, some of them came as international students, just like Han and myself. And essentially, we're losing a global talent war as a result of these relationships to countries like Canada. Guess what? You search it. There's articles about is American dream being replaced by Canadian dream because they have all kinds of policy. And guess what? Same things happening to, from a venture capital perspective, India and Europe. They're getting a lot of capitals are actually redirecting to other parts of the world because of concerns of the political uncertainty. So I wanted to reflect with everybody and think about what are we learning from general media and the information asymmetry and the biases in our decision making, and take not only this top-down approach, but really look at people around you. Look at the people around you that came from China, came from other parts of the world, and really have this human connection. We're actually not that different. And speaking of difference, I believe what makes you different does not make you any less. In fact, if anything, you're contributing more. What makes you different? And this is speaking to not only my Asian American friends, but friends from everywhere that looks all kinds. What makes you different does not make you any less. It only make you contribute more because of the unique perspectives. And I also wanted to echo Min's point earlier, ask for help. And Hans' point earlier about, show up, speak up, stand up for what you stand for. I also wanted to add to that, actually, in addition to finding like-minded people, find different-minded people. Because we all have decision-making biases, but when you bring people from different perspectives, collectively, this is what I call collective intelligence, you're going to make better decisions and less biased if we compare notes with each other. So I hope that answers not only U.S., China. Of course, specifically, there are areas that are global efforts. In fact, we use United Nations Sustainable Development Goal as our thesis in terms of all these different tracks in the Born Global community, because these are all efforts that needs global collaboration, whether it's environmental issues, sustainability issue, supply chain issues, and smart city, and AI, for example. These are not local issues you can just solve in one part of the world. We really need to collaborate and work on these, basically pressing issues that's facing the entire mankind. And of course, that goes to, not only US, China, but the rest part of the world. We just really, when the world is falling apart, this is really where we need to work together more than any other times.
Wow.
Thanks.
All right. Well, nothing can follow that. Only, nothing but the public questions. Riding on that energy, we have 10 minutes. Open up the floor if you have any follow-up questions for these awesome panels. Go ahead.
I'm actually Taiwanese, but I've done a lot of consulting projects with China companies. And one kind of the consulting project is China company wants to know how Americans do what. And so they are learning from Americans. So for example, recently there's a big company in China. They want to learn in pixel resolution how Amazon train their employees, how they do learning and development for their employees. So because I know China company, actually I think China is a very respectful country and very competitive. And I'm not going to put this question like a stereotype, but you mentioned about the bias, the investment bias, the cognitive bias, the social bias. But my question, I want to reverse this. If you are an investor, you are looking at the pitching companies, or you are a company that you are looking for partners or suppliers. And so when you look at Asians, what will make you want to work with Asians? What's the special strengths of Asians? And you will prefer to invest in Asians or work with Asians?
I think as an investor, as I want to support Asian entrepreneur, founders, startups, but I still think there is a generic framework regardless of the ethnic background. Otherwise, we are exercising the a judgment bias in the other not so great way, right? So when I started my venture career 13 years ago, again with my background, PhD, inventor and so on, I used to think in great detail about all the nitty-gritties of technologies. And I would read every line of a patent from a company, but as time went on, of course, as everybody said, right, the people matter most. An idea can be pretty inexpensive. But then the next question is how I really assess the founder quality. So I would describe or break it down into several buckets. The first is what kind of insight does the founder really carry? Does that insight really translate into a winning strategy? I think a lot of founders probably already struggle at that point. Many people think strategies for large companies, Dell, Microsoft, and so on. But I would argue, just given limited resource, manpower, budget, it matters even more for a startup to pick the right direction, given just the little ammo you have. That kind of mental exercise is always stimulating to me. And let's assume we agree on the winning strategy that cover, product differentiation and so on. Does that really translate into a workable plan that can best utilize your limited resource? And then, of course, do you have the people to exercise and execute? But when you think about this kind of a loop with the 4 components, it's like a flywheel that has to keep on refining every once in a while from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100. A startup is hard because every stage, every level you build and evolve, you can, that kind of a way you can break it down, right? You just got either stuck or ran out of cash and fail. So as an investor, obviously the benefit, my job is that we recognize a lot of patterns, a lot of lessons from people's success and failure. That's always interesting to discuss with the founders. The second bucket I care a whole lot about is it takes a whole team to build. And it's very hard for a solo founder to shine after a certain point. So does a founder have the this magnetic power to attract talents even early on? And can you really pitch to your co-founders? Because to me, that translated how can you pitch to an investor and how it translate into how you pitch to a business partner, customers, and so on and so forth. And then the third one is really tenacity. Everything is hard. I have had a hard job. Raising a fund for me. I ran into all this kind of a pushback from LPs. I pitched to more than 400, now probably approaching 500 LPs to get to my current fund size. So every time I had to turn down a founder, sometimes I add a line, say, look, hopefully don't feel too bad, because you probably need to talk to 30, 40 VCs to raise your round. But for me, there was just like a fraction of the LPs I had to talk to. A startup has to go through ups and downs, good time, bad time. But on most days, I'm sure Ming would say, you have all kinds of issues or headache to deal with. You mentioned we a couple of times. They started in the Bay Area as Asian only, but they expanded to Hispanic as well for online grocery delivery. Even though we celebrate their fundraising success, but look, every time I spoke to the CEO, we just only talk about all the problems and challenges. During COVID, as much as people say they got a tailwind from the COVID to get the boost, but I would also just challenge that kind of question that if you have that kind of a tailwind, can you really capture it? Can you really ride along it? Can you really scale with the right team to do everything properly to serve the customers? And here's actually a really funny joke from the COVID time. I think it was summer 2020, still in the Bay Area. It was very hard for customers, for everybody, to buy grocery. People had to get up early to get onto the We app to start making an order. And I saw a screenshot of this working mom with kids. She basically posted a question: if my husband and the CEO of We both fell off the boat into a river, which one should I save first? Of course, she answered the question herself. Of course, I'll save the CEO of We, because we cannot afford not to have grocery. She didn't go on to say she could afford not to have a husband. But joke aside, we laugh about it. But behind it, there was a lot of hard work by the company. And I still remember the day I got a text message from the CEO when they reported the first COVID positive in the warehouse. Now everybody's thinking, you will be a minority when you don't have COVID positive. But back then, when the first time it happened, it was like, oh gosh, what can we do? What can we save the business, right? So nothing is easy, and that's why tenacity is something I also care a whole lot about. As an investor, we don't write tiny little amount of capital. If we are in, we want to double down. We are all in, not just a capital commitment, but also our time. So we are ready to share that journey with the founders if we both choose to work with each other. So anyway, so the list can go on, and happy to share more offline as well.
Thank you. More questions?
If I may add, as an investor, what we are looking for is product, market, founder, investor fit. So essentially, we talk about product market fit, which is super important, validation, market-driven instead of product-driven. I think that's one tendency founders tend to make. But also find the alignment of what you care about, what the investor care about, so that the whole universe can, really work it out for you. And this is all to add what Han already shared. The other thing is, essentially, I always talk about okay, you guys go look for unicorn founders. I just want my cockroach founders. Show me how resilient you are. Show me what doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. Because failure, speaking of all the challenges and problems, that's the real life. It's not the shiny media coverage we all read, right? Essentially that's really what the founders dealing with all the time and what investors can add value in addition to writing a check. So, we'll have to wrap it up. I know.
Yeah, do it. Maybe one more questions from the audience.
Perfect, back to Han.
It's a couple inch short of 42 feet.
What?
Whoa!
Right about here?
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
It's actually cherry pit doesn't bounce well. So even it does, probably doesn't help you much.
Yeah.
Is it reproducible?
Great question.
Reproducible and accidental.
Over the time, I think was very reproducible.
Yeah.
So you may win again. Do you think?
I don't know, because there was a local judge. He competed several years. Every time he got second place. And he was his distance was just shorter than mine by just about 2 or 3 inches. It was luck, right? So I'm sure he practiced a lot. Yeah.
All right. Well, to end this, let's give some practical action items for the public, for anyone who wants to help Asian community or engage with the Asian community. The question being, I had this thought of instead of just random, one takeaway. When the Atlanta shooting happens, right, the Asian spa, and that sparked the whole wave of the anti-Asian hate, the awareness of it, right? So when that happens, instantly our sister chambers in the city, the Hispanic, Black Chamber, LGBT Chamber, and Austin Chamber, rallied together with us and then stand by us and issued a joint statement of saying, how can we help? How can we help Asian businesses? How can we help the Asian communities? And we received tons of just individuals asking how to help. And I'm someone that I want a to-do list, right? I wanted to protect the environment. Give me a to-do list, step 1, 2, 3. So in probably 1 minute from each, would you give us some practical advice on how do you engage with the Asian community here? How do you help each other? Help us.
I wanted to say that everyone, you are the biggest enemy of yourselves. The reason you're not visible, the reason you're not represented, you need to step up. You need to show up. You need to do this for yourselves. And the good news is the world is shifting. The overall structure from organization to a society is shifting from a traditional top to bottom pyramid hierarchical structure to decentralized structure, which means if you feel marginalized, guess what? You can contribute. So you have your own fate. You are the change you're waiting to see. It's all in your hands. And again, every end of event is really just beginning of our friendship and our call to action and working together. I think I'm connected with most of you, but if not, I'd love to connect, and we have ongoing programs. We want to make the changes. We want to break the two worlds of venture investing. We want to share what we're learning to everyone so that when you couldn't make it to the table, we bring you to the table, we flip the table so that you have access to capital, you have access to opportunity, you have access to growth, but it's all up to you in your own hands. So join us as part of the Born Global movement. Thanks.
I'm reflecting back on a couple of questions, including your question earlier. I think, what we do at SO when we're recruiting talent is actually not look at the talent that much. We just look at their character, their value system, their likability, their personality. Can you talk to them and have a good conversation? And that is often the foundation of a good relationship. And it's really up to us to teach them what we need as a company. And so, for one, I am very introverted, and I've practiced very hard to try to be on panels like this, and it's nerve-wracking, but still, you can immediately tell the character of a person right away. And so the best advice I've always given any of my friends or our staff is just to make sure that you surround yourself by people that you are proud to be around. Secondly, we mentioned the word resilience a lot, and I can't re-emphasize how important that is. At SO, we're doing a funding round today, and we've had tremendous success, but I've also been rejected 100 times during this raise, including people on this panel. But not pointing fingers or anything, but
that investor will regret a ton.
But here, I can sit next to Dr. Han here, and we can, talk about business and how we're going to change the culture of startups, the culture of Asian empowerment, the culture of community empowerment. And so, again, it's about resilience. It's not having that defensive shield. It's about moving forward and staying on the offensive. So.
I am a customer of SO. Love the food. As an investor, I don't manage my own money for most part, so that is a constraint. That is a tough part. There are all these things I have to look for to work with. But having said that, raising funding for Asian founders or GPs. It is a tough one, right? And especially when we work in a space that people think, gosh, the sentiment is just, old-fashioned business. There's nothing new about it. How you deal with the real estate, the labor, and so on and so forth. To definitely Ming and his team's credit, actually they have done something really marvelous. But again, it just all these constraints we face as investors. Sometimes we have to back out. But having said that, I also have a model that if we have to turn down 99 out of 100 investment opportunities, is there something else we can do to help these companies, right? That can be a short-term thing, that can be a long-term matter. My favorite example was 2015, as I was about to leave my previous firm to start iFly. So there was a founder in Palo Alto. He was doing something really incredible. But Formation A partners, actually the founders, decided to split. It was not the best time to talk about fundraising. So I just give all the transparency to this founder. But I did make two introduction right away. Both of them turned out to be pretty helpful. And who knows? 4 years later, in 2019, I was about to raise my second fund. So the same founder who I turned down back in Palo Alto in 2015 introduced me to a family office on the East Coast that became the LP of my second fund. So I think at some point we talk about helping each other, be willing to help, be generous. And to me, the takeaway is we cannot be so overly calculated, right? There are people who choose to do that, that's fine. But really the karma goes around the room. When you have a reputation, when you help people, good things will just happen. Even if it doesn't, when you feel that you have been helpful to someone else, that's always the best. That's why I'm always grateful when I had to say no to Min the next day. He did not defriend me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Delivered, right?
Yes, of course.
Not on the blacklist.
Yeah. So, but back to Fang's question. And again, we can talk so much about the Asian community and help each other. But I also wanted to share something as a part of a cross-pollination, right? How we can collectively learn and share the knowledge, share the best practice. We are all busy. And so I listened to all these Audible books as much or as fast as I could. A lot of the books are irrelevant to business. A lot of them are relevant. But that kind of cross-pollination of ideas from different people's experience, industries, success or failure, to me is so helpful. So when it comes to the Asian or AAPI community, how we really work out more solutions, I actually recommend a book called David versus Goliath. It's by Malcolm Gladwell, this famous writer for many New York Times bestseller books. And so in the book, the spirit is about underdog, right? The underdog is everywhere, from Asian military battles to modern day business competition or sports games. But the underdog wins not just because overnight I got a muscle the size as a main, but really it's about how you find your own playbook. And we are serious about boosting API. What else can we do to find new ways to do it right, to do it more effectively, right? So I don't have all the answers, but also it takes a community to find these solutions. Back in the Bay Area last year, there was this Tech for API. People had even a hackathon about building all these tools. For example, how can we report these incidents faster, sooner, so that we can have more responsiveness? The list goes on and on. And I'm not here to draw any conclusion, but really encourage people to bring your knowledge, your experience, resource to this community and help each other prosper and thrive. And thank you again.
Thank you. Thank every one of you. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I know Fang's going to give the conclusion. I also wanted to thank Capital Factory. Shout out to Mark for hosting us. Of course, Gordon, who's in Dallas, and the rest of the Capital Factory crew. But really appreciate your hospitality. And I believe Mark is also ready to give everybody a tour if you have the time. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that before Fang gives the closing remarks. And also thanks to our friends who are on ACC board, Jessica here, and Tyler over there, who's not only ACC board, but also board of advisors at Bush China Foundation, and so many others. So, Fang, back to you.
All right, thank you. That's a half of the closing already. So that's very helpful. Sunny have been more than helpful. Thank you for everyone's time to share your experience, insights, and energy with us. And thank you all for taking your time of the day to listen to us, to care about this community. We're all in this together more than we think we are. Tour, Mark, are we on it? Please, if you're interested, have a tour of this capital. When international people, when the international government, we work with them a lot, come over, they always say, can you connect me to a capital factory? Because that's the crown, of the innovation startup system in Austin. And then they are just doing fantastic. In Asian Chamber, one more plug, we're building this first ever Texas Asian Economic Summit. So it's gonna be the conference during the day and the Best Asian Party at night, and then second day, some kind of a Texas experience, intimate experience for you to connect more, and the long weekends to just explore Austin and figure out on your own why Austin, why Texas. So stay tuned for that, and then Jessica and I are closely working with that. And thanks everyone's time. Stay as long as you can, network, meet your new friends, find your investors and then your startups. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
That was good, man. I love your
Jill,
philosophy.
you are so inspirational. Every time you talk, I want to go like.
Good job, babe. I mean, this is much needed, right?
Congratulations on everything. Yeah, thank you.
And you guys should come
Okay.
over to the Houston
I don't think I'm sweating anymore.
I'll send you an invite.
Nobody can.